Hello, Garland Nixon here with my dear friend Laith Marouf. We got a lot going on in the Middle East now. The Syrian crisis, the neocons, as usually, are up to no good. President Erdogan, God only knows what he's up to. So we got a lot to talk about. Let's talk. Hello, Garland here with Laith Marouf, and more so than ever, everyone needs to check out Laith's website. It's freepalestine.video. That's freepalestine.video. At a time when, of course, the empire is 100% going bananas. We got 2 months or so before Donald Trump comes in, and it looks like they're trying to raise all the hell they can over that period of time. And of course, that means that websites and movements, such as journalistic movements, such as freepalestine.video, will be increasingly under attack by the Zionists and, of course, by the U.S. empire. So go to freepalestine.video. That's Laith's website. Follow him on all their social media. Follow freepalestine.video. They actually do English language. It's like first person journalism right out of the area. They go to areas that have been bombed and attacked. They talk to people in the areas. Actually, incredible work. So you need to go there. And of course, since they are under attack, you need to donate at freepalestine.video. You can become a monthly donor. And of course, share freepalestine.video on all your social media platforms and follow them and keep up with them. You'll get all the latest stuff. If you want good info from that area, that's where you want to go to, freepalestine.video. All right, let's get started. And let me add this. A lot of people love these segments with Laith, and I'm just saying you can get that all the time. That's what you get at freepalestine.video. You don't have to wait for this weekly move and the other things, this weekly show and the other things that he does. So it's critical that we keep this going. All right, Laith, let's get down to it. Let's start here. We got a lot to talk about. The claim of a ceasefire. Hey, we got a ceasefire. And for some reason, that means that the Israelis just keep on bombing the hell out of Beirut. Talk to me about your thoughts on the so-called ceasefire. I've never seen a ceasefire where you don't cease firing. I thought those words were supposed to mean something. Stop firing. Apparently, ceasefire to the Israelis means fire, fire when ready. It's madness.
Yes. I mean, we have really entered a twilight zone situation, unprecedented in terms of the detachment that the empire has between its made-up reality that it wants to project and that which we all see and hear. And the language is being raped in front of us, honestly. Okay, so we were told for 14 months there's no genocide, and we're all watching it. And so to get to this point of, there is a ceasefire while we're all watching, these bombs fall on Lebanon. And, yesterday there was 4 martyred in the south of Lebanon. There's attacks on multiple villages in the Bekaa Valley, not only in the south of Lebanon. And there's these drones that constantly are flying over Beirut. And according to the UNIFIL, that is supposed to uphold this ceasefire, the Zionists have breached the ceasefire almost 100 times since the 27th of December. So it's not even a small number or a movement here or there. No, this is wide violations of what is supposed to be ceasefire. In my mind, there was never a ceasefire. I was actually, one of those that didn't think that it will ever happen. And looking at now back at why did it even get announced, and you can understand that most probably Hezbollah was has reached a point in this battle with the Zionists that it had no choice but to attack, okay, and not be only on the defensive line. And if it have done that at that moment, maybe some of people in the Lebanese society, as this war would have become very costly, the Zionists would have freaked out and went on a rampage against civilians. That Hezbollah would have been blamed by the Lebanese population. But now we see Hezbollah had allowed the Lebanese government that is weak and irrelevant and doesn't have any sovereignty over its country, and the Lebanese military that is, practically armed less than a gang in New York, okay, is to show that what can they do to stop the violations of Lebanese sovereignty with signing this agreement. And as we saw, they failed. So now if Hezbollah goes on the attack, and we're starting to see the beginnings of that, the Lebanese people will all understand why it was necessary to go on the attack.
I think also this is, in a weird way, a good example for the world. Here's what I mean. The Minsk Accords, right? They made a deal with Russia. If you do this, we'll do that. And if you don't, wipe out what's left of the Ukrainian military, we'll do all of these things. And they did none of them. And the Ukrainian military, as soon as they reconstituted themselves, started doing exactly what the Zionists are doing, attacking civilians. And so the empire made a deal that it never intended to keep, right? But we could go on and on. The so-called JCPOA with Iran, and they made a deal that they never intended to keep. And to me, more people needed to understand that if you make a Faustian deal, if you make a deal with the devil, he's coming for your soul. He ain't keeping a deal. That's not what he does, right? And so now what people are seeing is those who had any thought or hope left that the empire could ever or would ever make a deal and try to keep it in any way, shape, or form are learning what they needed to learn. And I think also when Trump comes in and let's say he wants to make a deal with the Russians or North Korea, or whoever the hell he says, let's make a deal. I think the world needs to understand the truth. It doesn't matter if he makes a deal. And it doesn't matter if Trump himself says, I got a deal and I want to keep the deal. The empire, not saying that he would or wouldn't, I'm just saying the empire, the nature of the empire, of empire is it will never keep a deal, because the term exceptional means it's an exception to the rule, an exception to all the rules. And the empire and Zionism right now, especially being on its back foot and getting its butt kicked by everybody from Yemen to Hezbollah to Russia, they keep no deals.
Oh, yes. And look, it's very understandable that even Hezbollah, let's say, needed a break to reorganize, to reacquaint itself with the leadership in all the important positions that never probably worked together in these positions, and then the men on the ground and what have you, and to rearm. But I say this knowing the sacrifice that the Lebanese people have given and the axis of resistance up until now to support the Palestinian people in this genocidal times. But I think the axis of resistance strategist leadership made a mistake in their analysis. They thought that this could be a war of attrition, that it could follow the usual pattern of decolonization struggles, and it will come up with the same outcome as Algeria or Vietnam. Now, I think this was a miscalculation because they didn't understand how deep Zionism has got a hold of the imperial ruling structures, whether it's the media, the banks, the corporations, the military, the social media, all of that. Okay, that is, crucial parts of the mechanisms of the empire that the empire cannot even shed without committing suicide. Okay, so because of that, what we saw is that they openly said, we don't want this war, we're just trying to defend the Palestinians or give them some solidarity front. They openly, while at the same time, the enemy, Netanyahu, was openly saying that this is a war of existence for the Zionist colony, and that there's no red lines. Okay? And he went ahead and assassinated, from the president of Iran to the head of Hezbollah, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, to the heads of Hamas and everybody in between those. Okay? And so if the axis of resistance didn't understand before that there is going to be forced on them, this war of existence, even if they in their mind they thought they can drag it, and that's just why they didn't go on an offensive. It was understandable for 6 months that they didn't go into an offensive in the beginning, until they won the whole world on their side. Whole of humanity watched the Zionists commit genocide in Gaza. But after 6 months, they should have went on the offensive. And when I'm talking about the offensive, I mean invading and liberating Palestine. These Wahhabi death squads, which we'll be talking about, that got into Aleppo in 2 days. Do you think the special forces of Hezbollah couldn't have reached Jerusalem in 2 days if they invaded? They would. But that's the miscalculation that happened in the axis of resistance, and they paid for it heavily with all those casualties and assassinations. And now they're going to have no choice but to reassess, because the Israelis are going to cross all the other red lines, invade Syria probably, and with Trump threatening yesterday in this post online that he will bring hell if the Israeli prisoners of war are not released by January 20th. That's a declaration of war already. And so, I'm sorry, I kind of strayed away from where you were asking.
That's what we're here for. We're here for your view on these things, right? So it's critical. I'm sitting here listening. The other thing I think is this. Maybe one thing they didn't take into, I don't know, they didn't, maybe did or didn't, and that is, you can view this as the Zionist war on the Palestinians or in the region or whatever, right? But to the neocons, they see that the empire is crumbling, or they don't want to admit that the empire is crumbling. So they have a myriad of issues they need to address. So one of the reasons they're going after Syria is opening a second front on Russia, right? That's one of the many things. It's, well, okay, here's what we're going to do. We'll overthrow the government of Georgia, and then we'll use Georgia as the second front and sacrifice Georgia and turn it into Ukraine 2.0. Well, the Georgians, being wise enough, said, yeah, no, how about we don't do that, right? So when they lost that, it was, oh crap. So we're getting our butts kicked here in Lebanon. What can we do? Well, we can maybe attack Syria and try to cut off the resistance there and the flow of weapons there, and open a new front on Russia and blah, blah, blah. So my point is this. You really have to view the conflict not through the lens only of the Zionists going after the Palestinians, taking the West Bank, but you also, at the same time, have to understand that the Zionists have other machinations to go after Russia, that it is World War III to the Zionists if you're trying to control and dominate the world. And most of the world says, then it is World War III, because the Zionists basically have declared war on the world. The majority of, realistically, the majority of the world that doesn't want to be dominated with him, they have declared, the rest of the world doesn't want World War III, but the imperialists / Zionists have declared World War III. And you have to see it through that lens. Your thoughts?
Oh, yes, you are very correct. This is the struggle here has its local implications, let's say on Palestine, inside Palestine, the liberation of Palestine has its regional implications, the axis of resistance versus the Abraham Accord Club, basically. And then it has the international implications, which include, as you mentioned aptly, the Russian involvement here, the American involvement, and of course the Chinese involvement, because Syria, which is the route for the Belt and Road Initiative. If Syria falls to the imperialists, the Zionists, the whole Belt and Road Initiative is gone. There's no meaning to it, because it would be a block on all trade from India to captured Syria, right? There's no way for the Chinese to go forward with that. So it is a world war, and on the one hand, the axis of resistance has been taking the brunt of imperialist, death machine, and for the last, what can we say, 20 years. And so the Russians and the Chinese actually have a debt to pay at this moment. Yes, Russia saved Syria with its Air Force involvement in the Syria dirty war. But if they didn't get involved, then the Americans would have been at the doors of Moscow if Damascus.
Well, I'll put it like this. What they have to see is this. I would put it different than a debt to pay. I would put it like this, that in the same way that the axis of resistance works as a well-oiled machine as best it can, because if one falls, they all fall, right? I think Russia and China really have to look at this. I mean, for instance, these terrorist attacks in Pakistan, they've attacked, bombed Chinese buses. The CIA's behind that, right? So the U.S. is attacking, and another critical part of the Belt and Road, right, that's being constructed. They're attacking Chinese that are there. The United States CIA is literally killing Chinese people, attacking them. And I think what Russia and China have to see is it's not that they're partners. They're like a resistance bloc. They have to really knuckle down and really be cohesive as one bloc and say, we are under attack, not we are helping the Syrians, we are helping the Chinese, we are helping this. But in the same way that the imperialists see the world as one chessboard that they're fighting to dominate, I think the people that are, and I'm not going to say defending, because sometimes you got, as they say, a good offense is the best defense, that I think they have to see it there. And I think they have to go on the offensive. And I think Africa needs to be a critical place where they go on the offensive. And I think they're building that. You and I keep talking about Africa. I believe that Africa will eventually be a critical part of this entire thing.
Yes. Look, when I use the word debt to pay, I was specifically talking about Russia, and I'll tell you why I use this word. I know,
okay.
and we're allies, and I'm not trying to be, holier than thou or anything like this.
Certainly.
But the last battle before the Astana Agreement came into effect, that was a bone-crunching battle between Hezbollah and the Syrian military on one side, and the Turkish military and these Wahhabi death squads in the Saraqib highway juncture between Idlib and Aleppo. And the Syrian military and Hezbollah were rolling in. They were going to defeat the Turkish army and liberate Idlib. And the Russians asked for a ceasefire in hopes that they can sway Erdogan to walk away from NATO and sway him into BRICS, have these negotiations, and that was a wrong assessment. We're going to talk about Erdogan, as you said in the beginning, but it was a wrong assessment, because what can the axis of resistance and or Russia offer to Turkey that the West can't outbid? If you're dealing about in a point of not any more principle, this is not a principled regime, so you have to bribe them, basically. You have to give them something more. Well, Americans can print whatever they want to and give it to Turkey. Why would Turkey leave? Okay, so it was already a wrong assessment from Russia, and because Russia stopped that, liberation process that was happening in Idlib, we see ourselves today in this position. And that is why Russia immediately right now rushed in, sending strategic bombers, and the Syrian military gave control of the special forces to the Nimr, the Tiger forces, general that liberated Aleppo last time, and the presidency of Russia last time in 2015, 2016, by the way, President Putin gave the general that leads the Tiger forces of the Syrian military direct control of all the air assets of Russia in Syria. And under his command, he was able, as a Syrian general, to call in air bombardment by the Russian Air Force without having to go back to Russian generals. And today, this is what happened. Now, that is showing you that actually President Putin and Russia understand that they are part of the reason why we're here, and they're trying to correct that. Now it's time to correct it fast, and we have to get rid of the existence of the Wahhabi Contras in all of Idlib and North Aleppo. And similarly, we have to deal with the Kurdish Contras, which just began attacking Deir ez-Zor today with American air cover.
When the neocons and the Zionists decide, okay, it was obvious, okay, we're going to shut this down here on Lebanon so we can get our breath, and we're going to attack Syria and take Syria out. My first thought was, that's a mistake on their part. Initially, they're going to gain some ground, but in the same way that when they attacked Ukraine, it kind of backs Russia into a corner, because Russia now has to fight for its life. It knows if we lose Ukraine, we're screwed. You never want to put a person in a position where they can't lose. They got to fight for their life, right? I think when it comes to Syria, the resistance, and Russia, because Russia has 2 bases, and Iran, everybody involved is saying, we can't lose Syria. They will fight, tooth and nail for Syria. I think the Zionists and the empire made a mistake, because while they may get some early, PR victories and some early victories, sure, it's a war, you're going to win some battles. I think over the long run, Syria is so important that this will give the opportunity to eject the US, to eject Turkey, to eject all of these people that have no business in Syria. It will give the opportunity to fight for Syria once and for all, and to throw them out of Syria.
And because of that threat from Trump, giving that what are we, like January 20th, we're now December 4th. Yeah. So we're like what, a month and a half away,
almost going on 2 months, whatever.
So the Iranians and the Russians actually have now an burning imperative to clear the playing board in Syria before Trump arrives. Because if they're caught in the midst of a war in Syria when Trump comes and they're overstretched and he starts attacking Iran directly, they're going to get caught with their pants down, basically. Okay, so we will see right now an overwhelming use of force. If they're serious, I hope the strategists have learned already the lessons from the last 14 months in the axis of resistance and in Russia. But looking at the battlefield in Ukraine, I think Russia has understood where we're going, but it has to carry that strategic outlook into Syria, meaning it has to stop not allowing the Syrian military to use the S-300 or other air defenses. It has to hand over air defenses to Iran before Trump comes in. All of those are going to be crucial in any battle comes in. And if they delay again or think about negotiating something, they're just going to be cornered in a bigger battle that they are not ready for.
Let's talk about, let's go right to it. Erdogan. To me, he pretended to play both sides of the fence, but he never really did. And the only thing that we're really seeing about Erdogan, to me, there are people that are like, oh, he's shocked, he's thrown his lot in with the Zionists and the neocons, is he just ain't hiding it anymore. That's all he always was. Great. He's come out of the closet. He's no longer a closeted Zionist. He's out there now. He's straight out saying, you know what, I'm down with the Zionists.
Yeah, there was demonstrators.
Go ahead.
Yeah, there was demonstrators that at a speech that he was giving a few days ago, Turkish demonstrators in Turkey, that were screaming at him about the trade that he continues. Although they passed the parliament in Ankara, the parliament passed a blockade kind of situation on the Israelis and a ban on any trade sale of Turkish products to the Zionist colony, and they're still continuing. So these demonstrators, were doing what's usually done in the U.S. or whatever it is, just screaming with a few banners, and they got beaten up and rounded, and they're still in jail. 9 youth, half of them women, much of them in hijab even. So this is the constituency of Erdogan himself. It wasn't like the leftist or the nationalist or whatever. It was the Muslim Brotherhood kind of constituency that he speaks to. So we could see the beginnings of effect of the propaganda that he's been doing for 14 years that is not relating to the actions of Turkey, that is in opposition to the actions of Turkey, which is completely in bed with the Zionists being their main supplier of oil products, their main supplier of diapers for the Israeli soldiers. Without them, the Israeli soldiers, without Turkish diapers, Israeli soldiers would have, sullied their pants, So now I think anyone that had this illusion that you can straighten a dog's tail have stopped, and the Russians have to deal with this mistake and clear all the Wahhabi death squads that are sponsored by Turkey from Syria.
Let me ask you this: I would think, in my opinion, the Turkish people are already furious and unhappy. It seems to me that this has the potential to destabilize politically Turkey internally.
Yes, and I think both Russia and Iran must be regretting that they saved Erdogan last time when there was a coup. I mean, without them giving him notice and a way out and a way to communicate with the military while the coup was happening, he would have been gone. And you think about it, what Erdogan just did right now was a signal to Trump to please don't coup me again. Right? Remember, it was Trump last time that tried to do the coup against him, because Erdogan is counted on the liberal wing of the empire, like Qatar, like Jordan, like the Democrats in the U.S. So Trump wanted him to replace him with a conservative wing, like the Netanyahus and the Sauds and so forth. So now he probably wanted to signal to Trump that I'm here to service you, master, whichever way. Look at what I'm doing. I'm going to take Aleppo and raise the Turkish flag over the fort of Aleppo, the historical fort. He has to be made to pay a price for this. The worst kind of slave is the house slave that tells master anytime one of the slaves is getting out of control or having thoughts of rebellion. There's no way to deal with the house slave except burning them with the master's house.
Well, the other thing about it is, and I always do this, there's a negative and a positive side to everything, and the positive side is you don't have to guess with Erdogan anymore. You know what I mean? I mean, as long as he play, oh no, I'm your friend. Oh well, but I'm going to still send Ukraine some Bayraktar drones. Oh, but let's do a blah blah blah. Now you don't have to say, I wonder where Erdogan stands here. So in a way, when someone clearly stabs you in the back and throws their lot, it's the best thing that could happen to the BRICS and the Russians and all of the countries that were looking at Erdogan, because now They may decide to do some kind of a BRICS move and say Turkey is going to be an integral part of this. That ain't happening now. And
Oh,
so
yes.
for their long-term plans, I think Erdogan has done them a great favor, and he shall surely regret it. Because again, a Faustian bargain with the devil. The U.S. empire will say, yeah, we got you covered, Erdogan, until they don't.
You mentioned Ukraine there. This attack on Syria was planned just a month and a half ago. A meeting of the Ukrainian intelligence, the Israeli intelligence, the French intelligence, the Turkish intelligence, and these Wahhabi death squads. They met in Bab el Hawa border crossing between Turkey and north of Aleppo. And they planned everything that we know. And the Ukrainian special forces right now were filmed in the streets of Aleppo. And we saw the Ukrainian drones that are really Turkish drones manufactured in Ukraine under license, being the main weapon used by these Wahhabi death squads in the battle now. And these Wahhabis don't know how to operate these Ukrainian drones, so there's with them these Ukrainian intelligence and special forces that are operating the drones. So it is in the vital interest of Russia to wipe out these Ukrainian intelligence units. Remember, there's this world war happening actually between Ukraine and Russia. The Ukrainians are killing and harassing Russian workers and mercenaries in Central Africa, and now they're doing it in Syria. So there's the battle of Ukraine is being fought on Syrian soil also. Similarly, with the Chinese, the Uyghur terrorists were releasing the first videos of the invasion of Aleppo. There's a collection of all the Central Asian countries, the Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Azerbaijan, blah, 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 that are all, plus the Uyghurs and the Chechens and the Pakistani Brits. Again, they're bringing us Pakistani Brits on the ground in Aleppo. This is the at least half of the fighting force is from these foreigners. So China has, and Russia itself, they both have an interest in making sure none of these Central Asian terrorists ever leave the battlefield alive. So they're going to have to, both China and Russia, put everything they have to make sure that Syria wins this battle, and as fast as possible and in a crushing way, that there's no more return to this fight over and over again and again.
Yeah, I think, everything the neocons do never works out against them. And I think that this is going to really backfire, because one of the things is they were able to drag the Syrian thing out forever. They drag it out. They continue to have their terrorists there. They continue with all of these things. This is going, I believe, they have created a dynamic where the forces of Iran and Russia and the resistance forces and all are going to have to snuff it out once and for all. And I think that's what happens now. And then, let me ask you this. I've read lots about Iraqis pouring in. I read something about American planes or other planes attacking some of the Iraqis coming in. That Iran has said we will fully support them, whatever they need. Iran's made it clear. The Iranians and the Russians, I've read they've been on the phone talking about full support for it. What are you hearing about the kind of support that's coming into Syria? I've read and seen pictures of columns of fighters and tanks, and it seems to me that the axis of resistance is serious about this, and that there's some heavy resources coming in for some kind of it seems to me some kind of a major offensive is coming. Is that the way it looks to you?
Yes, it looks like this way. I mean, obviously, once we started seeing videos of these Wahhabi Contras speaking to the Israeli media and the Israeli public, telling them that we're friends, don't worry about us, we hate Hamas, we'll kill Hamas for you. These were videos of interviews on Israeli television. So once that happened, it was clear what we're stuck in right now. And so on the one hand, there is definitely tens of thousands of Iraqi fighters that already crossed. But on the other hand, we see the Popular Mobilization Unit leadership claiming that they didn't. Obviously, they need to have some deniability to it. And at the same time, they are building all these defensive lines on the border between Syria and Iraq in fear that the Kurdish Contras or the Wahhabi Contras would cross the border like happened last time with ISIS. So Iraq is on the verge, okay, of also being embroiled directly in this war. And given that there's all these American bases on the ground in Iraq, I think if I was honestly in charge of anything, I would be right now bombarding all the American bases in the region to force their expulsion before Trump comes in. There's no need to wait for them to be used against Iran and the rest of the axis of resistance in a future war. So
I think that's go ahead. I think that's coming. I think maybe when there's some kind of an offensive, there will be hit the bases. There's two ways to do it. You could hit the bases to destroy them and knock them out, or it's kind of like in the, my brother was in the military and he said, you'd far rather wound 5 soldiers than kill 5, because now you got 5 wounded soldiers and you got to take 2 guys per soldier to drag them out. You know what I mean? A dead man on the battlefield is less trouble than a wounded guy, because you got to get him out and deal with that and all that. And in a way, it may be more effective rather than just flatten the bomb them and take them out, to continually, once some kind of offensive goes on, to continually to harass them, to hit them with drones, to hit them with, you know what I mean, to keep them occupied and busy defending these bases and force them to move there. But we're just talking military strategy. God knows I'm not a military strategist.
Yeah, and we're not in charge of it anyways. So, but they definitely the axis of resistance should concentrate on destroying the long arm of the Zionists, meaning their air force. If they're going to go a volley of thousands of missiles, take out all the air bases, and the ability of the U.S. to resupply its troops on the ground. And once that happens, the Americans will withdraw with the least casualties. But if they just sit down and take blows, any minute now the Israelis or the Americans will assassinate the Ayatollah. That's the last thing that's left, or President Assad. Everybody else within the axis of resistance leadership, and Abdul Malik al-Houthi in Yemen. Those are the 3 last ones left: Assad, the Ayatollah, and the Houthis. That's it. So what, are they going to sit down and wait for them to be assassinated? That would be the stupidest thing possible. So they have to go on the offensive. Fortune prefers, what is it called? The bold, fortune something, the bold.
Yeah.
Whatever proverb there in English.
Well, and I'll say this. We've discussed it. Here's what I predict. One of these weeks, you and I are going to be talking about the attacks in Africa. We will be talking about the attacks of U.S. bases in Africa. I will guarantee you there. I don't know when, but that's going to be coming. You mentioned the Ansar Allah in Yemen, right? Now I forgot if that means soldiers of God. Does that mean soldiers of God or allies of God?
Allies of God. Allies of God.
I understand that they struck occupied Palestine again, and they said something about that it was because the Zionists are breaching the agreement. What's going on? What do we need to know about what's happening with them? And might I add, it seems to me they kind of clobbered the U.S. Navy. It seems to me that I don't read, like the U.S. Navy must have backed away, left. I think they got hit. One of their aircraft carriers got hit, and they kind of disengaged after that. Maybe a little bit of bombing, but what good does that do to bomb? Because everything's underground and they know how to deal with that. Anyway, what do we need to know about Yemen?
Yes, so after Yemen chased away those 3 different aircraft carrier fighting groups, including the Yemenis claimed that they hit 2 aircraft carriers. The Americans were, scaled down all their Navy presence in the Arabian Sea, the Red Sea, and the Gulf of Oman. but they still need to supply their troops in the region. So there was a convoy of three military cargo ships, one of them having aircraft fuel, the other, munitions, and the third supplies for the bases. And they were protected by an American destroyer. This is 2 days ago, and Yemen hit the American destroyer and the three supply ships. So if they continue on this pattern, cutting off the supply for the American forces in the region, and the Americans having to then depend on airlifting resources to their troops, this is a dangerous situation for the Americans, because how many flights can you do? One huge supply ship can carry what 10 aircrafts can carry. It's not feasible to just depend on an air supply route. And today the Yemeni forces announced that they fired on Tel Aviv, they fired on Eilat in the south on the Red Sea, and they fired on the Golan Heights. And so people were worried that with Hezbollah accepting the ceasefire, that maybe the other fronts also will slow down their solidarity attacks on the Zionist colony. But as we see, it seems like the Yemenis are not going to slow down their attacks. They are filling some gap that now Hezbollah has left. Yes, it's not as big as what Hezbollah could deliver because it's so close in terms of geography, but this is still very significant for them to be hitting major Israeli bases in the south of occupied Palestine and in the region around Tel Aviv and in the Golan Heights.
I tell you, one of the reasons that I think Yemen is really a critical part of this whole of the axis of resistance. I mean, like an integral part of the axis of resistance, because of what happened before the conflict. Here's what I mean: the Brits, the Saudis, the U.S. bombed them for years and years. It didn't do any good. But what they were able to do is they were able to punch the Saudis enough that the Saudis had to back down. Meanwhile, the UAE sitting there with all those glass cities saying, "Ooh, we better back down," right? So what they did, they put up a certain air of intimidation against some of these Gulf states who said, "Yeah, they're small, but man, they can hurt us real bad in a hurry. They can take out our oil infrastructure or at least damage it so bad." So I think what the deterrence factor that Yemen created, every bit as much as what they're doing as far as from a naval perspective, defeating the Imperial Navy. They defeated the Imperial Navy easily, right? A one-sided fight. But the important thing is they created a deterrence, and the Gulf state, the UAE and the Saudi Arabia always have to take into account, we can't stretch ourselves but so far, because if we piss Ansar Allah off, they're going to hurt us. And here's what they know: you can't bargain with Ansar Allah. They're not going to sit there and have a chat about it. They're not going to think about the international economic effects. They're doing God's work, and they're going to keep doing God's work.
Oh yes. And you see, this is where at that moment the Saudis and the Emiratis switched to, instead of directly confronting the Yemenis, using their money to destabilize and do all these intelligence and buy mercenaries and what have you. And we saw them, expand their meddling on behalf of the empire into Sudan and into Somalia when they failed to achieve anything in Yemen. But I am of the opinion that in a full-out regional war, Yemen should destroy these glass towers, should end the existence of these fake countries, and liberate the Arabian people people of the Arabian Peninsula out of these vessels. I'm you can hear me today how frustrated I am, and also how, I want to see action. I'm not anymore compromising, because I tell you, if they hold axis of resistance, if Russia, if China don't go on the offensive right now, things are going to be too late to do. Even for the liberation of Palestine, I believe we still can liberate Palestine within a year from now. But if it's not, if we don't go on the offensive, it's going to take another 30 years, and that's not acceptable to think that another generation of Palestinians will live under the genocide and apartheid, and or another generation of the Arabic people can live humiliation. This how China looks at the century of humiliation between the Opium Wars and the communist revolution. The Arab people have been living a century of humiliation since the end of World War II and the capture of the Arabic lands and chopping them off. And it's getting to an explosive moment. It can't last longer than this. And either we're all going to be genocided like the indigenous people of the Americas, or we have to be liberated now. There's no compromise.
Well, there's so much going on because internally, the empire is in a disaster. It is, I put it like a drowning man who's reaching in all directions for anything he can to pull himself out of the water. Externally, look what's happening. They're trying to, we're going to do tariffs against China. Well, that's going to wreck your economy. Oh, we're going to continue supporting Ukraine. You can't win that war. It's already been lost. You got nothing there, right? And now Ukraine is a mercenary force that be used in Africa, to be used wherever. They don't even care about Ukraine anymore. They're using Ukrainians as a more mercenary U.S. imperial force around the world, right? Look what's happening in Romania, in Georgia. The French government's about to fall. God knows the economy of Germany. You know what I mean? Internally, everywhere. This thing is coming unglued. South Korea, I don't know if you're familiar with that. A very, very unpopular leader, because he's going along with U.S. imperialism, has just had to declare martial law. South Korea is coming unglued. So the whole thing internally, the outside fights, to me, are a reflection of the internal collapse. There's internal moral collapse. People are, come on, I put it like this. People are like this. We have nothing against gay people or whatever. Let them live their lives and leave them alone. But the government and the movies don't have to scream all day long about this stuff. People are getting tired of that. There's just so much going on internally. So from the outside, the people on the outside still see the U.S. empire is this strong, powerful force that's out there. But if you're here internally, you see this thing's coming unglued everywhere, man. It is a disaster here in America and in Europe. It is just, it's falling apart in every way.
You mentioned the martial law being called in South Korea. And while it doesn't look like it has anything to do with Palestine, it has everything to do with Palestine. Why? Look at what's happening in Japan, just across the waters from South Korea. There is now, for the first time in something like 60 years, confrontations between Japanese people and the police, fights in front of the Israeli and the American embassies. This has, Japanese people are very polite. They never fight with their police. The police don't carry arms. And you saw a street fight in Japan. Now, that one is very clear that it's about Palestine. But what is happening in Korea and the rest of the world, the whole Western alliance, is that there's a huge detachment between the aspirations of the people in the United States, in Europe, in Canada, in South Korea, that want peace, that want to have trade, that want to have better health care, that, majority of human beings are decent. They don't hate for the hell of it somebody else and other cultures or so on. And they're seeing their governments spend their money on these endless wars, the amount of money that is being requested of Korea to dish out to the American forces stationed there and the defensive systems that the US is pushing on them is huge. If Korea didn't have to pay this huge military bill, it will be one of the richest nations on the planet.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
already rich, but it would be richer than any European country because of the electronic output, technology output that it has. It's not matched anywhere in Europe. There's no European country that can compete with South Korea with its technological output and trade. Even cars, Korean cars sell better than all European cars combined. Why is Korea still impoverished, South Korea, compared to, for instance, Germany or whatever? So it is, Palestine is making all these contradictions, even when it's not directly the issue. It's making all these contradictions more inflamed and driving the people into rebellion. And I hope the peoples in these countries, in the United States, in Canada, in Europe, actually stand up for themselves and try to force their governments to comply with their will.
Talk about the attacks on ez-Zor.
Oh yes, this is my hometown, Deir ez-Zor. This is across from it. The city is the Conoco oil field. This is one of the biggest American occupation base in Syria. Yesterday, multiple things happened just to show you how the Kurdish Contras and the Wahhabi Contras are really not at war. Anybody that thought ISIS was at war with the Kurds is delusional. As the Syrian military was trying to withdraw from Aleppo, just for a second before we go back to Deir ez-Zor, the Kurdish Contras attacked the city from the east as the Wahhabi Contras were attacking from the west. And they were trying to kind of block the Syrian military from withdrawing so they can get slaughtered. And then they took over and handed the northern parts of the city without a fight to the Wahhabi death squads, and then gathered themselves in the Conoco oil field and tried to attack Deir ez-Zor city yesterday. And the villagers in the villages around Deir ez-Zor city mobilized themselves with their small weapons and created a militia that aided the Syrian military and defeated the attempted invasion of Deir ez-Zor city. Thankfully, it didn't fall. In the war that passed in the last 10 years in Syria, Deir ez-Zor was the only major city that, other than Damascus, that didn't fall into occupation, and thankfully it didn't fall neither now. And since the morning, there's been back and forth, and the American military got really pissed off because their Kurdish dogs didn't achieve anything. So we saw the American Air Force punish the villages around Deir ez-Zor city with doing air bombardment of civilian homes. There's, I think, up until now, like 10 civilians, mainly children and women, that were killed in these American raids. And now we are seeing waves of drones and missiles hitting the American bases there. This is also all connected to the Deir ez-Zor being on the main route between the Iraqi border and Aleppo. You have to go through Deir ez-Zor. So the Americans are trying to cut the highway by crossing the river so they can stop the flow of fighters and weapons that are coming to defend the Syrian military and also to resupply Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you very much. Great. I mean, it's really a privilege to get the information that we get from you, to get the perspectives that we get from you, and to understand how it's viewed from Beirut, Lebanon, and particularly with the person who is working on a very important journalistic endeavor. FreePalestine.video. That's where you want to go to find out all of Laith's stuff. Make sure you follow them on all their social media platforms, on X, It's a great platform to follow them because Laith is constantly putting stuff up and letting you know what's going on. So follow them on all their platforms. Also, as you probably could guess, they are under attack, as many of us in the alternative media are, but they're particularly under attack. So they're doing everything they can now to cut their funding. So we need you to go to freepalestine.video and as best you can to support them. Additionally, there's an option on there for you to become a monthly supporter. That's very important. You know, even if you give a little less than you can, and then a one time, but you become a monthly supporter, that's really something that adds up, makes it easier on you, keeps them with what's called in the business world RMR, recurring monthly revenue. That's that's critical to keep them going. So
if I can plug one thing right there,
go ahead.
You know, we have produced almost 350 reports last month.
Wow.
This is a phenomenal number. You know, there's a new video that just came out that everybody who calls themselves Christian should go and watch. It's a tour of me and the former UK ambassador to Azerbaijan, Craig Moray. We visited the cave of the Lady of Waiting, where Mother Mary would sit in this cave just outside Saida in the south of Lebanon, waiting for Jesus while he would be preaching in Saida. And so this almost got under attack. Go watch this video to understand what's happening to the Christian communities in Lebanon and their support for the resistance. Thank you very much, Garland, for hosting me today. And I'll see you next week.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody. Share this on all your social media platforms. Remember, visit freepalestine.video regularly because they put a lot of work up. They put a lot of stuff up and you need to see it. Also, you see everything scrolling across the bottom. Follow me on Rockfin. Follow me on Telegram. Follow me on Rumble in case I get thrown off of one platform or another. You'll still be able to find me. And if you can afford it, PayPal, whatever, Patreon, buy me a coffee would be great if you can afford it. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great day. We're out. All right, Laith. Look, also